So my grandparents were very different, and especially when it came to food. My mother's side, Eli and May. May was from Budapest. Eli was from Lithuania. And I just remember Eli doing a lot of the cooking, you know, and it was a very tight kitchen. And I just always remember that's where we hovered around. That's where everyone is. And it was sort of, the cooking was going on as we were all sitting there, and they were speaking Yiddish sometimes. And I remember everything being oversized. I remember Eli making these massive meatballs, or the stuffed cabbage, or whatever it was, latkes. On my father's side, it was a completely different experience, which was also great. Was my grandmother, Helen, her name was, did the cooking by herself, all of it herself. I always remember her in an apron. And the cooking started early in the morning. It started with shopping. And I do remember, because I spent summers with her, was in Atlantic City, going with her to the butcher, and she would use kosher meat, though she was not kosher, you know, but she would still use that. And it was more like her cooking in there and us waiting for the event. You know, we would be doing whatever we were doing, playing outside. And then, you know, there'd be this really structured, sort of formal dinner. You know, that was really interesting, because it went from hors d'oeuvres to appetizer to entree, and the entrees were always like big roasts. And I remember her, you know, watching her chop, you know, everything by hand, you know, for like the chopped liver, everything by hand. She was super hyper focused on her cooking. You know, it was perfect. She, you know, it was almost closer to be what would be a professional kitchen. There was always the buffet table with 3 to 5 different desserts. She was a great baker, and she baked them that day. It was crazy. One of them being her cheesecake, which was always there. My brother, who keeps much better records than me, does have some recipes written down. You know, the cheesecake that Helen did is directly from that. My grandmother made, I imagine, what I would consider on the East Coast a classic New York style cheesecake, which would mean graham cracker crust with the natural flavor of a New York cheesecake. It may be topped with fruits, like she had these amazing strawberry patches. Like, you talk about a smell, because I remember in the morning waking up and it was just like, wow. You know, it was strong. So maybe there'd be a strawberry compote over it or something. Sometimes not. If it was in the winter, it probably would just be served that way. And I think that New York style cheesecake, if you're from the East Coast, everyone knows that. You know, it's interesting that Helen chose to spend her time in the kitchen all day. I mean, it was all day, man. You know, I remember her sitting down in break, she'd keep her apron on, you know, and she'd sit down, watch TV for half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever it was, and then go back and cook. And that was every day. I mean, there's certain things that we all grew up, no matter what nationality you are or religion, that you grew up with. So there's such a strong reference point. To this day, when I want to find out about a food, I go there, because I need that reference. And I think it's the same thing with your grandparents or your parents. You know, there's a certain reference and cue you have from that, whether it's the actual food, how you socially interact it, whatever it is. And like I said, like, the thing that brings me back to that the most is smell. That's the connection with your family, for me.